Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week.
Each week, the idea was that the topic helped people think and write about their experience from a different perspective.
Does that help you when you're doing your PhD and you can say, well, we won't know how valuable this work is for another 100 years, so you may as well just give me the benefit of the doubt?
Every word is going to be valuable in 100 years. So keep going towards the overall thing of 100,000 words. It's going to be worth it.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday.
Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle.
Tackling the stigma.
Okay, let's say welcome to Mental Health Monday this week. Two guests who are going to tell us about the work that they have been doing through coronavirus, COVID-19, the Writing for Wellbeing anthology. Welcome to the programme, Bernadette McBride, who's a PhD candidate in creative writing at the University of Liverpool. And we've got Senior Lecturer in English, Dr. Sam Solnick. Guys, how are we? Great to see you.
Not too bad, thank you.
Now,
very thanks.
Writing for Wellbeing, it's a brilliant idea. Who wants to take responsibility first and foremost?
I think Bernadette has to take responsibility because this was really her brainchild.
But Sam took it on and helped me with it, and so that's good. I came to Sam and I was like, "Oh, I've got this idea, which I do quite a bit." And he was kind of like, oh, what now? And I was like, well, we could do this course during lockdown because we've done similar course before for NHS staff at Alderhay Hospital. Last year we had a 12-week course for staff, which was obviously face-to-face. And we're doing do you want to talk about the Merseycare project?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do a lot of kind of creative writing initiatives at the University of Liverpool, not all of them linked to mental health or well-being, but we tend to work on literature and science more broadly. So I've done a lot of work exploring climate change and ecology through creative writing. But in lockdown, it seemed that this would be a useful way of getting people to kind of explore their thoughts and experience of the kind of lockdown specifically and coronavirus and the situation more broadly. And Bernadette, with typical enthusiasm, started thinking about ways we could do that online and the people who would most benefit from it.
I think it's interesting, isn't it, that most people presume that because of something like COVID-19 and coronavirus, the response is a medical response, isn't it? You know, or it was about ensuring that it was about connections with communities through, you know, food parcels and things like that. But each and every one of us has got sort of different skill sets and different ideas. You obviously felt, Bernadette, that the work you'd done in creative writing was actually something that you could bring to this and could actually help people through what turned out to be a significant period of time.
Yeah, if anything, for a lot of people, it was just something to do because obviously the first few months we had the really severe lockdown and people could only leave the house once a day. You know, most people were only leaving once a day, weren't, to go for a walk and stuff. Some people have been furloughed and they sat at home and they couldn't see anybody and they really would have gone crazy and just had not had much to do. So they just really liked having that. Every week we sent it out via pre-recorded video. So obviously we couldn't say all meet on a Zoom at 12 o'clock every Wednesday because some people work in the hospital, some people were shielding, and sometimes people went in the headspace to just do it at a certain time so they could just pick it every week up when they felt like it. So it's a really good format.
Can you tell us then, what was the call to arms then, Bernadette? What was the thing you were asking people to do?
We had a different topic every week to keep it interesting, and most of the topics link back to research at the university as well, in the Literature and Science Hub. The first week we had was called Free as a Bird, and we've actually got an academic called Dr. Bethan Roberts who writes about nightingales and poetry, and she really kindly did like a bonus video for us talking about birds and poetry and how they could write a poem about similar things. So yeah, that was really good, and that we had loads of responses to that. We had poems about owls, poems about pheasants, but it all really came back to sort of, you know, the bird as a metaphor for how they were feeling. Obviously, you know, feeling trapped in the house. You had the irony of birds having more freedom than us for once outside. They could fly around and do what they wanted. I think that's a really good example of kind of what we were trying to do with the course. I think a lot of ideas around writing for well-being can be quite simplistic, like the idea that it's just about self-expression or it's cathartic and pouring yourself out. And as a kind of reader and scholar of English literature, I'm always kind of banging the drum for the fact that reading and writing can do so much more than that. So each week, the idea was that the topic helped people think and write about
their experience from a different perspective. Now, in the first week, that was through using kind of like the metaphor and the image of the bird, but we also did things like using science fiction to think about the different possible futures that people might want to see coming out of lockdown, or using Ted Hughes's poetry to think about what our relationship is with technology at this time where kind of all our relationships are mediated through technology. And the notion behind it is that through the process of writing, it's not writing poems and fiction rather than, say, a journal entry, you're kind of thinking about and reflecting on your experience more, that it makes it more, you move from kind of like individual expression to something a bit more generalizable that you can discuss and share and talk about, and that enables a process of increased reflection, if that makes sense.
So how were you able to bring so many and such a diverse number of people on board, Bernadette? What sort of conversations were you having to encourage people, from far and wide within the NHS, but then further afield, those who were shielding, to come on board?
It was really simplistic, really. It was quite easy to do because we had a contact with Vicky, who's the arts manager for Alder Hey. She sent an email out to something called the Arts for Health Network, which includes Gosh, Great Ormond Street, Sheffield, Manchester, and even Edinburgh hospitals. She just sent an email saying, we've got this course, it's available for all your staff from cleaners, healthcare, volunteers, consultants. So she just sent it out to all those hospitals, and we just had quite a lot of sign-ups straight away. I think people were looking for something to do, and people sort of emailed in and said, I'm really looking to figure out a way to express what I'm feeling at work, and I'm really looking forward to doing the course. And a lot of the time when people were emailing in, it wasn't just, have a look at my poem. It's kind of like, how are you getting on? How's the weather where you are? And just a bit of a chat thing, which I think people really liked as well. And I really like that because I've been sat here as well in a similar situation. But in terms of the general public, we've had people who've maybe been on furlough or working through it still in other key worker jobs. But you can't forget about people who are sort of working in supermarkets, delivering takeaway, keeping the country running. And then we have people who are shielding for health reasons. Like one person who's contributed quite a lot to the course has been shielding at home the whole time for asthma, severe asthma. So yeah, it's been a really big mix. And those people really came via just our Twitter account and just word of mouth, really.
Isn't it sort of odd, in the world that we're in, that, sort of politically there's this sense where, you have your ideas and you keep to your ideas and, you don't try and listen or learn because you've already made up your mind. But actually, Sam, you described before there the fact that you were straight away from almost day one, you were talking about being either sympathetic or empathetic to, or seeing the world from other people's point of views. I think sometimes people presume that those days are long gone, that we don't do that anymore because we've already decided how we see the world and we've already decided how we're going to view the world. But maybe coronavirus, maybe lockdown gave us a little bit of time to see the world from a slightly different point of view, or even see our own world from a slightly different point of view. How we then reflect that is something very different. You guys gave people an opportunity through creative writing.
Yeah, I think there's that. I mean, lockdown's given us nothing, for many people, nothing except time, right? And there's that question, not only how we use that time, but how we fill it. But more broadly, I think this is one of the most important things that literature does. We don't read things to be convinced by them, right? There's nothing very good if we just kind of go out, read something and it tells us what we already knew, but rather it provides us ways of thinking about and thinking through and experiencing other perspectives. And ultimately, coronavirus has presented us with a whole host of questions and challenges, only some of which are medical, but there are also questions about what sorts of society we want to live in, what sort of relationship to our community, to our nation, to other nations do we have, what's our perception of the media, what's our perception of science. These are all things that are kind of suddenly flowing across people's Twitter feeds, flowing across people's conversations and Zoom chats, and actually having writing and reading as a space to think about that in a slightly slower and self-reflexive way is really important. It's a form of mindfulness in itself, although I wouldn't want to reduce it to that.
But how do we maintain that, Bernadette? We've seen, the Chancellor speaking, and essentially beyond the medical side of things, it's come down to the economy. But actually, you guys have seen and proved that there's something in this in terms of moving forward. It would be a real shame if we said, right, no more lockdown, we don't need to write creatively or think creatively anymore. How do we maintain the momentum of a project like Writing for Wellbeing?
Well, we did have 1 week which was called Hope and Reimagining Futures. It's all about how we can reimagine the future. And a lot of the work that came up there was, did sort of come down to the sort of economy, practical things like reimagining how a town is structured in terms of like climate change. So yeah, I think it's something that's, I think lockdown's given us all a chance to reassess things and sort of take stock of, how we're living. And my work, my PhD in creative writing is actually around climate change and how it affects people emotionally and psychologically. And obviously those kind of barriers we have mentally which stop us from doing anything about these big issues to do with climate change. And I think a lot of that you can relate to coronavirus as well, because we've proven, when we do come up with a big problem which is more sort of, tangible, we can react to it, we can pull together, we can volunteer to take medicine to our neighbour we've never met before. We can all of a sudden, all try and find, a vaccine or start working on medical trials to try and benefit other people in different countries. We're all sort of, working towards a global problem. But with climate change, psychologists have sort of said because it's sort of a slower moving threat, and people find it hard to sort of react to it. We're more programmed to react to more perceived immediate threats, such as like, terrorism, which is, very unlikely going to get in the bus and anything's going to happen to you. But people are more afraid of those things that they see in the media. So yes, I think there's a lot of parallels really, and I think we can learn from this experience moving forward and adapt it to these sort of bigger issues that we've got.
Now, was there anything about when people were sending in their poems or their short stories, however they were putting that down, was there not something slightly intimidating, knowing that Dr. Sam Solnick from the University of Liverpool would be looking at them, like assessing and judging, like Sammy? I mean, these are NHS workers, at all different kinds of levels as well. Were you rolling your eyes? Were you tutting? Was some of the rubbish? Were you surprised by how good they were?
I mean, but I like to think that I never touch or roll my eyes, but Bernadette will probably say differently when I read her work. But also, I think Bernadette did as much, if not more, of the feedback than me to all the people, and has been really, I think, has been really helpful and constructive in helping people with their writing. I mean, because it's not just the topics that people have been covering, but also finding out different ways of writing about things. And that's one of the things Bernadette as a creative writing instructor has been really brilliant at, and both on this course and more broadly, is helping people kind of pick out what's most important in their work. I don't think people, the thing with creative writing is that it is for sharing and it is for discussing. And some people find that nerve-wracking. I still, as someone who's written both creatively and critically, always find it nerve-wracking when I send stuff off for friends or colleagues or academics to read. But I think, that's part of the joy of it. I think we
great to share work, aren't they?
Yeah.
So brave to share work.
And it's been some of the work one of the reasons we've turned it into an anthology, which was definitely not our plan at the beginning. I mean, initially we thought, well, we'll just make some videos and maybe this will, help some people and people be able to spend some time doing these. But it's actually because we see such kind of remarkable work on occasion, like really fascinating stuff as people begin to develop their ideas and develop their writing, that we thought, hey, why don't we bring this together so that other people can read it, and it's not just me sitting in my room being like, oh, that's a really good poem.
Well, was that the balance that you had to strike, Bernadette, when you were offering assessment? Bearing in mind it was about well-being, you didn't want to say, well, this isn't good enough. You had to, obviously, people would have found it, a cathartic thing potentially to write, but at the same time, there's that critical element to it, where you've got to get that balance right, otherwise people are disencouraged to continue doing it.
Some people would say, like Bernadette, I'd like it if you give me some constructive criticism, give me some more, feedback in different ways and stuff like that. And I would for those people, but I would give general feedback, or if I noticed maybe somebody could maybe change the voice slightly, or the time shifts and stuff like that, change things around a little bit. But bearing in mind, the whole course was about writing for well-being. The purpose of the course was to get some boost to your well-being by doing writing, rather than writing to be published. As it happens, the work's been so good, we've now got an anthology. But I just sent you a few poems. I'm not sure if you get a chance to play them, but one person, Julie, who's a scientist, and she has agreed for me to sort of talk about this. She's a cancer scientist. She's sort of used to being in labs all the time, not very creative, and she started sending work in. I said to her, "Oh, this is absolutely fantastic. You're writing brilliant. A lot of comedy in her earlier work as well." And she couldn't believe it. She said, "You really think it's good?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant." And I think just giving people that confidence. And then since then, she's written so much more. She's gone from comedy to some more sort of, really beautiful sort of, longer poems and stuff. There's a big mix, but she's got a lot of talent, and some of her stuff is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So it goes to show you can be a scientist in a lab and you can write really creative poems as well.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to include Julie Hayes' I Say I'm Below 95. That's one of the very funny ones. I'll include that as like a little bonus at the end of the podcast. So people, like an album track, if you just leave it at the end of the podcast, it'll come on at the end. We're going to hear, though, Ivor Daniels cycling during COVID-19, and Dr. Sam's going to give us a critical response to it. This is Ivor Daniels' work from the Writing for Wellbeing anthology, put together by Dr. Sam Solnick from the University of Liverpool alongside Bernadette McBride.
Traffic is down to 1955 levels, someone said. It must have been on the radio. We still have radio in the first wave. The pheasant, surprised, not startled. It does not screech like the older ones do when shocked by bike or car. Which is good, because I don't think humans have a word that truly holds the sound of panicked pheasants in that moment just before they remember they can fly. That sound we heard on lanes like this before the human lockdown.
Now, to me, that sounded absolutely brilliant. Dr. Sam, though, I'm going to ask you to give a critical assessment of Ivor's work there. He was cycling during COVID. I like that. Particularly, he gave radio a mention, so I like that in particular.
Yeah, what I really like about this poem is that it's both kind of speaks to the quite intimate experiences that many of us had during lockdown, like a transformation of the way we moved through space, because, we walk through cities, but they're empty. We walk through roads, but they're quiet. And we have that moment of kind of reevaluating what had seemed very familiar. And what's nice about this poem is it reflects both back to the past and the way things were before. And I think that's something that people have been talking about alongside what things might look in the future. Not the kind of space colonies of science fiction, but a weird new future that we hadn't really imagined. But there's also these really nice kind of literary touches and literary allusions. So he talks about it being cruel April, which I'm pretty sure is a reference to April is the cruelest month from The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, which is one of the most famous poems of the 20th century. And because, of course, April fell early on in lockdown, the 1st of April, and people were all tweeting, April is the cruelest month. This time that is supposed to be about spring and regeneration and rebirth is now this time we're spending under lockdown. There's also a nod there to Julius Caesar. I think 3/4 of the way down, he talks about the Ides of March, right? The Ides of March, this date that Julius Caesar is supposed to be where pride coming before a fall and then things kind of falling apart, perhaps a nod to leaders who think they're emperors and know too much. Who knows? So it's this wonderful combination of kind of personal observations, literary allusions, but also the things that are really important, things that these broader social issues that come up, these questions of kind of sexual and social violence that people were concerned with, domestic violence during lockdown. So it's that combination of different things being brought together in actually a kind of very dense space that made this one of our favourite poems.
Really like it. Great work, Ivor. Bernadette, can I ask you, you were obviously picking the themes week by week, but then did you see different themes coming back at you, different things which you hadn't mentioned that were being referenced in work, sort of maybe experiences, common references that people were bringing back and sort of reflecting back toward you?
Yeah, I had, I would say maybe, talk about politics, but different references to the government and governments across the world about how they were dealing with things. We talk things like shortage of PPE and stuff like that. Food food was a big one, and especially during the first month where you couldn't get an online shop, even if you were vulnerable. Going to the supermarket was an absolute nightmare. Sort of things that make life viable, having food to eat, your government supporting you. They were things that cropped up quite a lot throughout all the poems. Obviously, you could tell some people who were a bit more left or right kind of thing. Most were more left, but so it was really interesting. That was something, and also just a lot of people. Even we had one specific week on time about the concept of time and stuff, and but throughout we did have people seem to be sort of reflecting on the life on before coronavirus, like taking stock a lot and going back to sort of childhood memories and things. I do think obviously writing is an act that makes you pause. They're looking at every week, they're looking at the video, they're reading the handout and all the suggested readings, and they're sitting there wherever they are with the pen and paper or the laptop, and they're having to stop and write down what they're feeling and thinking. And it's completely different to say having a chat with your friend on the phone about how your week's gone.
Absolutely. Dr. Sam, I've got to ask you this. This is obviously an anthology, and we'll mention about how people can sort of be part of it and get hold of it and read it. Is there an argument that says that actually the value in this isn't almost instant? The value of this is in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, in 100 years' time, as we look back at how we got through, hopefully, this environment and this situation, and how people actually felt and how people were able to express it. Because we will look at the stats and we'll look at those terrible death tolls and the numbers in the hospitals and the work that they've had to do. But historically, I wonder whether or not, the value in a project like this is that people in 100 years' time can look back and see, how did people feel during that time? And if we look through, wartime, often those pieces of literature which reflect on people's lives and life experience and the genuine first-hand experience, lived experience of these events, is the thing that really gives us the insight into what was really going on at that time.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. One of the things that's really fascinated me, not just kind of within this project, but broadly being online during coronavirus, is the amount of kind of poetry and pieces of short writing that people are posting online. So I think kind of scholars in 100 years' time, if the internet is still available from this moment, if they just went through Twitter and typed in #CoronaPoem, would find the most incredible kind of living and evolving archive of people's self-reflections and affective and emotional experiences of what's going on at this moment. And there's there've been some wonderful online poetry groups like International Poetry Circle and Corona Poetry, where people are writing, posting, discussing and sharing poetry. And that gives us a real insight, not just, as you say, into the kind of quantitative stats of what was going on, but how this kind of permeated different people's lives across different sections of society. And again, I think literature and poetry does give a different sort of snapshot to a kind of newspaper article or a journal extract or something like that. But yeah, I think there is an element of posterity in recording how we felt. Like the lived experience of 2020 is something that we've never seen before.
And Bernadette, does that help you when you're doing your PhD and you can say, well, we won't know how valuable this work is for another 100 years, so you may as well just give me the benefit of the doubt?
Well, because I've got to write 100,000 words, I just think, well, every word is going to be valuable in 100 years. So keep going towards the overall thing of 100,000 words. It's going to be worth it.
People can find out more information at liverpool.ac.uk. If you click on the literature and science section there's a Wellbeing link which people can find and make their connections to the anthology as well. You got submissions until Friday the 17th of July at 5 p.m. as well, so people can make their connections there. You mentioned the Corona Poem hashtag as well, and examples about how people can get involved in there too. A brilliant idea, and I think it's really fascinating to see just how widespread it's gone in terms of the number of people who've wanted to get on board, and I think the quality of it, absolutely. In terms of the release, Bernadette, you're looking to get this out, a quick turnaround in terms of the anthology out where people can read it.
Yeah, we hope to have this done sometime in August, I think, depending on how fast we can edit it and produce it. But as ever, I was going to say there's nothing but time, but that sounds like we've got nothing but but yeah, it's the main thing we're working on at the moment. Just to add that actually probably the easiest way to find information about this is on our Twitter page, which is @LitSciHub.
@LitSciHub, and we'll get links on that on our social media for when we're posting that one as well. Bernadette, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on the project. A brilliant idea. Dr. Sam Solnick, thank you for your expertise and your assessment. Poor old Ivor. We've done it live on the programme there. If we downloaded that,
proud Sam for having to do that live on the program.
He'll be downloading the podcast thinking, "Oh, I contributed to that," and then he'll hear the full assessment. Absolutely,
brilliant feedback.
Absolutely, Bernadette McBride and Dr. Sam Solnick. The Writing for Wellbeing anthology. We'll get all the links up and about on our social media too. Thanks for joining us on Mental Health Monday, guys.
Thanks very much for having us.
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter @Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999. Thanks for downloading the podcast this week. We'll be back next week with more Mental Health Monday.
I say, I'm below 95%. I'm all right, Jack. I'll know when I'm ready to dial 999 to call out the heavies. Whisk me from my castle and tend to my gases. My monitor tells me my levels are lacking. My machine will speed up your struggling system and I can get home, tell my family I miss them. It's below 95. I say, I need intervention. Please take a seat there, sir. We're a bit short on monitors.